Hey friends, my name is June and I'm a developer advocate at Zeplin. Today I'm here to chat about design systems built with data. But before we dive in, for those of you who don't know, Zeplin is an organized workspace to publish designs where the entire team can collaborate to ship beautiful products together. We've recently reached over 5 million users, and over the years, I've had the opportunity to talk to lots of teams about design systems. Most teams I talk to love this theoretical idea of a design system, but they all seem to run into some kind of adoption issue. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Someone at your company takes the initiative and starts to create a design system. Let's call this someone Bob. Bob is a front-end developer that just joined a company that's about 1,000-ish people. Soon after, Bob starts to notice that he's not sure what components to build next and where to find all the new components. On top of all that, nothing was really consistent from project to project. Bob is an innovator and he worked with a few designers to start creating this thing called a design system. Excitedly, Bob shares the design system with the rest of the developers on the team, and he gets a few developers to join the quest to deliver consistent user experiences. The few developers that join Bob's design system starts to notice the value of it quickly. Everything was consistent, reusable, and easy to find. After that, the project grows, and naturally, the design system grows over time and becomes bloated. Since the design system becomes so bloated, some developers who don't have that tribal knowledge like Bob can't really keep track of all the components that are being used and what components should be deprecated. Now, how will Bob let the company know that this design system thing is really worth it? How can Bob show what the design system did to really help other developers? What's the ROI? How do you measure the success of a design system? I think one of the ways we can start answering those questions is through actionable data. Today, I want to talk about design systems driven by data. Collecting data from design systems is difficult, and it's even harder to analyze or make sense of all that data. I'm excited to share that the Zeppelin crew have been cooking up a storm in the last couple of years, and I can't wait to share what we created. But before we go into that, here's what we'll talk about today. The first thing is how design systems came to be, followed up by the problems with design systems today, and lastly is using design systems data to inform decisions. In the modern world, design systems really started to take off in the world of architecture. Design systems started when many people had to work together for a long period of time to achieve something really complicated. Architecture really dominated the design system space up until about the 1970s, as Christopher talks about it in this book, just because it required so many people to work together seamlessly to build those super tall skyscrapers that we know and love today. And then we saw the emergence of the graphic standard manual. Public transit is another place where design systems help tons of different people that need to work together with a shared vocabulary. Fast forward to today, most companies have design systems just like back in the day with architecture. So what is a design system today? A design system defines and organizes a collection of reusable components that can be adopted, analyzed, and scaled. For me, a great design system can be summed up into 4 different buckets. The first bucket is all about the principle, the values that drive the ecosystem that you are defining. Followed up by the guidelines. Guidelines are all about the best practices, how to avoid those paper cuts, and how to start applying those values to the design system. And then we have patterns. Patterns are the meat and potatoes of a design system. This is all about the reusable components. And lastly, we have practice. Practice is probably the least loved, but the most important thing to keep your design system alive and well. Design systems have to grow organically in parallel with the project and team that you're working on, and that's where the practice comes in. And the way to grow a design system is to treat the design system as a product, an internal product. Like any good product, there needs to be a way to get feedback and justify the spend on maintaining a design system. Developers and the whole product team needs to quickly see how well each component is performing. And once you can see how all these different components, like core or those one-off components, wouldn't it be awesome to visually see how all your components are working together? What new components are emerging and which ones are being used? If I update or deprecate this component, how would that affect my team? Many design systems have been spun up, but I heard everywhere that adoption was an issue. After digging in, we realized that the practice part was missing. Today, I want to double click into this practice thing. As your project organically grows over time, so will your design system. We all know that not all components are created equal, and as you get more and more components, there needs to be a way to know what components are being used, how frequent, and what teams are using them. Companies like Netflix, Product Board, and Segment have created internal tools to help them measure how well their design system is being adopted over time. This is Segment's internal tool right here, and they built this to measure what components are being used and by what team. Yet these in-house solutions require engineering resources and continuous maintenance, which takes away the focus and resources from people doing their own day jobs, right? But what about Bob? Bob works at a startup that doesn't have the resources to create a custom design system adoption tool. Sadly, it looks like Bob has to turn to open source projects or maintain it with our favorite tool ever, which is an Excel doc. It's inevitable that your project will have more and more components as time goes on, and it becomes more and more difficult to stay on top of all the new components and all the old ones. We all know that Bob is new, and he's having a problem keeping tabs on all the new components that have been recently added to the project. There are also cases where Bob has to create a one-off custom component for a particular project that he's working on. But the problem is that Ross, who's Bob's coworker and another front-end developer, is also creating a one-off custom component that's eerily similar to Bob's. So instead of expanding the list of custom components, there should be a way to recognize this usage pattern and transform these custom components into one core component. Developers like Ross and Bob love to reuse components, but there needs to be an easy way to surface all the components across all your projects. Today, I know some developers are using workarounds like using Control F to scan through their projects, or using something like a React scanner to build custom internal apps that scans your code to show some basic info like what the most frequently used component is. And lastly, if you're new, like Bob, or you transfer from a different team, how do you gain that tribal knowledge on what components are being used and how that component affects the rest of the project? Today, developers like Bob are not confident in what components to build next because they lack critical data on how all the components in the project are strung together. I've heard from some teams that as a workaround, they use an Excel doc to try to map out how each component is connected to each other. But this takes a whole lot of manual work and does a very poor job of visualizing all that data that a developer like Bob needs. If you're not confident in how that component is related to other components, how can Bob know what to improve or what to deprecate? Every good story needs an even better villain. And here, the villains for design systems are the inability to measure progress, unclear usage patterns, and lastly, component dependencies are confusing. Not all heroes wear capes, and in this case, I'm super excited to share that this is a hero that no one has ever seen before. From the people that brought you Zeplin, I'm so honored to announce our hero for that villain, Omelet. So what is Omelet? Omelet is a component exploration and monitoring tool that helps front-end developers like Bob drive design system usage and increase component library adoption. In just a few seconds, Omelet automatically detects all your components in your project, both reusable core library components, as well as one-off components too. Omelet will also show you where a component is used throughout all your projects and component dependencies as well. This helps development teams measure the effectiveness of their design system over time, helping teams track usage patterns and identify underlying issues, ultimately helping drive design system adoption and consistent usage of components. Omelet comes with two tools. First is the Omelet CLI. This detects and analyzes all your components in your projects. And the second is the Omelet web app. This is where we put all the data we got on your components into a nice visual dashboard. Today, we're going to check out 3 features. The first is measuring the progress and adoption of your components over time. Then we're going to check out how easy it is to identify new components that are made and used by your team. And lastly, we're going to check out how to measure the usage of components with a component dependency tree. So instead of showing you more slides, I thought what better way to introduce a brand new shiny product than a quick little demo. So here it is. So the first thing we have to do is install the Omelet CLI. We can install the CLI through npm. For our demo today, we'll be analyzing an open source React project called Proton. Proton provides privacy-focused email, calendar, and file storage. Here, I'm going to navigate to my Proton project using terminal. Now, we're going to use the command omelet analyze. Omelet analyze is a command that we use to scan through your codebase and surface all your components. Here's a command I used previously, and what I'm doing here is taking the omelet analyze command and passing through some file paths to indicate where the component lives in the codebase. Once the scan is completed, in just a few seconds, Omelet will generate a URL where I can check out all that data that Omelet has just analyzed into a beautiful dashboard. All right, let's go ahead and open up that dashboard. And as you can see, this dashboard has two sections. It has analytics and components. As you can see, right when you open up Omelet, you're greeted by the analytics page, which shows you all the components in the order of most used to least. At the bottom, notice that Omelet provides a few useful charts right out of the box for you. For instance, when you click into component adoption over time, you can quickly see how your components are getting adopted. The green indicates are your core components coming from your design system or component library. The yellow indicates all those little one-off custom components that is not managed by your design system. I just added the project here a few days ago, so you won't see that gradual adoption over time, but you can see that there are some components that have been adopted from just a few days ago. Now the second chart I want to show you is component adoption by project. This Proton project is organized as a monorepo setup, so each project is set up as its own project. There are a few projects here like Proton Account, Proton Calendar, and Proton Mail. With Omelet, you can easily see the component usage across all of your projects. So now you can see that for whatever reason, Proton Mail is using a lot less core components. And now if you're a front-end developer like Bob or design systems engineer, you know what project is lagging behind in adopting your design system. But what about this filter thing to the left? These default charts are useful, but what if you want to get even more granular? You can build any chart you need based off the usage data that the CLI collected. For example, you can add more filters. This is my favorite feature so far because let's say I want to add or I want to see all the one-off custom components that are being used. I can see that Omelet returns a list of the most used components. And it looks like this item date component is being used quite often. So let's see how the component would make sense to add to the design system. So I'm going to hit the components tab and search that item date component. When I go into the details page, I can see this beautiful component dependency tree. Now I can see where this component is used across my project. And this will give me some insight if this component is worthy to be added to the design system library. This dependencies tree will also show how this component update might impact the rest of the app that I'm building. That was Omelet. Omelet is a design systems analytics tool that scans your codebase to detect components and their usage. You'll get real usage data in real time from customizable charts to measure adoption across all your projects and identify opportunities to improve your design system. At Omelet, we think that a design system is a product. And like any good product, your design system needs a feedback loop, and we think Omelet can provide that for you. Right now, Omelet is in private beta, and it currently supports React on Mac and Linux. Windows is coming soon. To all my React friends out there who are passionate about design system adoption, check out this link for the stealth private beta at omelet.dev. If you want to talk to me, Bob, or the rest of the Omelet team, we're on Discord too. Go ahead and click on this QR code or scan it with your phone. Take Omelet for a test drive and let me know how it solves your design system challenges. I'm excited to see what you build with Omelet. See ya.